post game. Cool.
Okay, guys, I do have to
Yeah.
say, whenever I worked today, but I got home and I slept.
Hmm.
So, I'm gonna spend some time with her a little bit before.
Yeah.
Yeah, no
You know what I
worries.
mean?
Yeah, I
Okay.
figure no worries. I'll record it, I'll put it up so you can see it. Jason, if
Yeah.
you want to
Oh,
hang
yeah.
out for a few minutes, that's cool.
Sure.
I was gonna kind of for the sake of the game
Yeah.
and all that, I was gonna talk a little bit about the roles, the random
Sure.
roles, because obviously
Sure.
you guys know some of them, right?
I
But
mean, if Dale has to go, that's fine. We can talk about
yeah.
it. So just for the sake of the
Hmm.
follow
Oh,
up.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think it'd be good. I'd
Yeah.
like to hear it, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because I could kinda
Yep.
tell when you were rolling different things, but,
Yeah.
even that last part where he grabbed, Joff, it's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was."
Basically.
that actually
Yeah.
that one. So that I had that as a role, and it was my very last one. And I was like, I don't like how the heck am I gonna work this in? And so I was just gonna ignore it, but then I thought, it'd be kind of a fun.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
it ties up some loose ends because
mhm.
I sent
Yeah,
Harvick to find Joff on the very first
right.
session.
Yeah,
Look
Session
what I
4.
caught.
yeah. And
Yeah.
Joff was a man at arms, I guess. Not a very
Yes.
good
Yeah, well,
one,
he was
but
a soldier. He was a
yeah.
soldier.
And
Yeah.
so he resumed his duties, which I thought was cool. But
Yeah.
so yeah, real quick, I'll say so. The first one was I just had farms burned. That's all I
Mhm.
had written down. So that's I introduced that when you guys
Yeah.
were kind of in the inciting incident. You could see the farms. So I didn't know what that was going to do. I didn't know who that was going to be. But then the second one I rolled was young Uda takes an injury, right? And so I the arrow to the arm, right? But he was going to keep going, and then Jason rolls the crit fail, right? And so I'm like, oh crap! So that's why he fell off the
Like it
horse.
saw off
Yeah.
his arm or something, like it made a
Yeah.
major artery. I was like, "Oh my god, watch it."
Well, I mean,
Take his sword arm
fortunately,
off.
Jason rolled fairly well in the end, to see how he did. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I
because
think he rolled
Oh, I know.
3 critical fails
Man,
early.
yeah,
that was cool
yeah.
when you said he was
Jesus.
gonna drill in the hole to
Yeah.
release the pressure, and it cracks me up every time when David's
Yeah.
playing and hears something like that. He goes, "Oh
He's like, oh
god."
my god, yeah. So the third
But,
one was Just a Car Returns. I'm not gonna
Right.
say more than that, but it was that.
yeah,
And then fourth one was Hostages Taken.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, fifth one
Yeah, I did pick
was
that up. Yeah.
and then the
yeah, I
fifth one was the
didn't either.
messenger. To now, I originally had it as a messenger from Northich to Uda saying men are coming to your aid, soon we'll crush that
Right.
scoundrel.
Right.
But I couldn't use Northich this time, so I made it from Howardtown instead because I
Right.
figure
Right.
they would be concerned about the
Sure, of
Danish
course.
army too. So yeah. So anyway, that
Yeah,
was
Yeah, I
those.
guess,
But
I
yeah,
guess the
yeah,
first
it was
one was.
good. I enjoyed it. I
Yep.
thank
enjoyed
you.
it, but
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, I'll listen to it. Y'all
All
keep
right,
Hmm.
going,
brother.
okay? Alright.
Sounds
Thanks, Dave.
good.
See you
Great
home.
game, man.
Alright.
All
I
right.
had guessed number 1 was crops burned. I guess was the RSC,
Yep.
and then number 2 I guess was arrow hits. I didn't think young Udda just hits one of us.
Yeah.
Something wounds Udda,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Arrow. I wouldn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess that RSC was lazy Londoners. That's the only 3 I had picked up.
Yeah.
But I also was out for like 5 minutes, so obviously an RSC showed up while my computer was locking up. That was the
Um.
messenger that I missed. So I missed 4,
Yeah,
I
that was
guess.
the messenger, right? Yep.
So I don't know if the lazy Londoners were an RSC, but I
It
was
wasn't.
guessing as
No.
things. It was not. I'll be damned.
No.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, well, it's funny. So I had on here. Where did I have? Oh, so I had one that said "Men from London cause trouble," but I didn't actually
Ah,
roll that one.
right,
But
right.
but I was thinking about it, and I was like, I kind of think that it made sense in the kind of context that it was like, God, these guys are here to fight the Danes, but like, oh my God,
Right.
here they are, this small battalion of good troops, with all of
Yeah.
these like peasants, you know, and they're
Yeah,
like,
right.
this
What are
is
we doing?
yeah,
Why are
like,
we saving Dredgewater? This
mm-hmm,
dump, right?
yeah,
Yeah, you know
yeah,
they resent having to be here to protect Dredgewater, right?
right,
Yeah,
exactly,
made
yeah.
perfect sense. Made perfect sense, right?
Yeah. But it was
Yeah.
funny. So I did put Young Uda takes an injury, and I also had on the RSE Westwell takes an injury.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Okay.
because I
Okay.
figured like those would make really good complications if,
Well, yes.
you
Yes.
know, if that came up, because clearly those two are very, very important, right? And
Right.
so it was interesting. And then I felt so bad though when you rolled that natural one, because I'm like, damn, you rolled it on this, on the complication, right?
Right.
I was like,
Right.
oh, so that was rough, because I was like, I don't want to do this, but and it
Yeah.
sucked too, because like I really would have loved to have had him be able to participate in the battle and perhaps earn some glory or whatever, you know,
Sure.
young Uda.
Sure.
But I was like, oh crap, like you
Yeah, but
rolled that
the
natural
fates
one. It
the
felt like,
fates had
yeah,
yeah the fates had something else in store for young Etta.
yeah. So I was like,
Yeah.
this is how it has to be, I think, because that was the logical way of concluding that, you know. And so it's just like, oh man. But that was fun. I
Yeah.
really, I was trying so hard at the end not to be like giving away the farm here, because I'm like, it felt like a good wrap up, but I didn't want to
Sure.
like, I didn't want to be like, yeah, and you get to be a prince now somewhere, and you get to,
Right, right, right.
but
Well, yeah, there
yeah,
definitely has to be some reward
yeah, for sure.
for military
Hmm.
service. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, and so
Um,
it was interesting too, because I mentioned the character. So to earn repute, the characters can assist in removing the Danish threat to Dredgewater,
mhm,
or otherwise secure the peace in Dredge County.
mhm,
And then I think I said like can resolve the mystery of Mort and what's going on with him,
mhm.
right? And so yeah, I mean, it was nice because I mean, geez, Del's rolls were ridiculous. Like that battle, it was, but it was really fun using the sort of mass combat, right?
Right.
Because I know you mention it in the book,
Uh-huh.
and I was looking at it, and I mean, it pretty much, but like we had done it in my old campaign too, where you kind of just set the DV based
Yeah.
on, you know, it's just the scale is different, but
Yep.
the
Yep.
mechanics are the same. And so
Yeah, I mean
I
it can be piece by piece,
hmm
roll by roll, or
yeah,
it can be macro.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
it can be very that's the whole point. It's kind
yeah,
of however the presenter wants to set up the challenge, so to speak.
right, right. Well, and
To be
I
honest,
really, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
in a narrative game,
Hmm.
it's just so much easier to set the DV, and then all
Yeah.
the rolls or all the
Hmm.
there have to be rolls to affect the DV.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
then of course the DV can also be tied directly to um for instance, I think the example I give is not in damage, it's in
Yeah.
successful DVs or successful
Right.
rolls.
Yeah.
So the example I give, they needed to get 9 successful rolls or 7 successful rolls before
Yes.
they
Yeah.
failed 7 successful, right?
Hmm.
So it isn't like a wound thing.
Yeah. Right.
However, the example I give, characters are getting wounded as they're
Yep.
failing those rolls,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
But if they get 7 successful rolls in
Hmm.
all of their describing the battle, the siege
Yeah.
of the castle,
Yep.
then they will eventually, if they get enough, they will eventually win it.
Right. Yeah.
If they
That's
fail, yeah. So
yeah. I
you're
was
free
gauging
as a
mine on
presenter
that
to come up
too.
with,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because I was
So
like, you know, but you kind of have to be flexible, because I was like, depending on also like how you guys describe it and how your rolls go, it might be a
correct,
little less than 7. It could be a little more,
correct.
but yeah, I
Yeah,
was like, you
but
know,
that's an
how's this gonna
example. It's not
go?
a rule. We make it
Yeah,
clear in the rules that there is no
yeah,
rule for mass combat. It's just
right.
macro or micro. But I give an example in the back of
Mm-hmm.
the book what mass combat might look like.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to put it in as a
Mm-hmm.
rule because I didn't want people to think, oh, this is the only way they can do mass
Right.
combat.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I like using a large DV, and then
Mm-hmm.
as they make rolls,
Yeah.
that DV is going to go up or down, and eventually the DV
Mm-hmm.
it becomes it becomes pedestrian, and they win.
Right.
If you're lowering that DV every time you succeed, eventually it becomes a pedestrian
Yeah.
DV, and well, obviously
Right.
narratively we've won,
Yeah, you
right?
won. Well, and
Yeah.
that was the thing. It was like, you know, I was thinking about and it was really cool to me to be able to have you use prestige
Right.
instead of body to influence
Right.
the combat, right? So like that first
Right.
round when you're like, we're charging in, and I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
god, he's charging
Yeah.
his fjord
Yeah.
against the
Yeah.
demons. And then of course you roll
Yeah.
the natural one, and I'm like, well fuck,
Yeah.
like what, because under, you know, in the single combat, right, you would take a
Mhm.
wound, but obviously that's
Right.
not what we were doing. So I was like, well, it
Yeah.
would make sense on a critical fail
Right.
that you guys just smashed yourselves against their
Yeah.
shields and broke, and
Yeah.
then
And
you
you
know,
could have given us a fatigued condition too. Uh,
yeah, I
you
could
could
have
have said,
it.
okay, it doesn't go well.
Yeah.
You've crashed against them, and by the way,
Hmm.
you're battered because it
Right.
makes sense. I'm on my horse, but I'm still fighting,
Yeah.
and so we could have
Yeah.
still taken some damage. But it depends on
Well,
whether you're using DV or
right.
you want to do it that way, right?
Well, and the way I looked at it was you did take the way I represented you taking damage was the I don't, I guess I wasn't like explicit about it, but basically
Right.
you lost a lot of
Mhm.
men in that
Yeah,
because they,
exactly.
you know,
Which
they
is,
died, so that
yeah.
was the, you know,
Hmm.
and because it was
Hmm.
a critical fail, it was like, oh god.
Yeah.
But that it was so fun to be able
Yep.
to run that, or kind of run that combat, right, where, you know, like getting to see you again using, at first using prestige and then
Yeah.
eventually using body, which made sense,
Right.
right? Then Dell being able to do the you know, the zoomed in, right, the
Yes.
micro,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So
Micro.
you were
Yep.
running macro at first, he was micro, and
Yep.
David was kind of in that macro space to an extent because
Yes.
he was sort
Yes.
of over, and it was great because, you know, and it just goes to show how, like, you don't have to be a sort of a martially minded character to
Correct.
have a major
Correct.
impact in a battle,
Right.
right? Because
That's right.
his influence and prestige on these,
Right.
you know, soldiers helped
Well, and as I
that.
described it to my local group when I was
Mm,
running them in playtest sessions, think of how the characters in your favorite show, like Last Kingdom or
yeah.
Star Wars,
Yeah.
or whatever, how
Hmm.
they impact the scene, narrative, how they impact the narrative story.
Right.
But they're not
Yeah.
necessarily the ones. They cut away to the fight scene, but they
Yeah.
cut back to Father whatever, and the father is
Hmm.
climbing the scaffolding, and he's gonna ring the bell or something to
Right.
call whatever, right? So they
Yeah.
can impact the thing, but they do it from what their character would do.
Hmm.
And that's
Totally.
it takes time because everybody comes to these games like, oh, we're in combat now. Oh man, that means I got to fight with my my
Hmm.
feeble-bodied magic user. Oh no, not in our game. In our game,
No.
your feeble-bodied magic user can impact the thing
Oh yeah.
with whatever you think your character would do to impact these
Right.
scenes. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, I
It's
mean,
completely flexible. Completely flexible. So it
yeah.
made sense that David wouldn't just fall into combat. It's like, of course, he's
Yeah.
described him as an old man. He's a tutor.
Yeah.
He's learned.
Yeah.
So I love that David refrained from just falling into battle, which was awesome.
Yeah. Me
I love that
too.
he refrained from using magic. I was like, oh man, David's really sticking to his character, not being
Yeah.
much of a magician, which is sweet.
Yeah.
So then he has to impact it in a different way. And he did
Hmm.
by actually turning to the people and saying, you fools, go do this,
Yeah.
do that. Fool, you need to do
Hmm.
this, you need to do that. It's like, okay, that's exactly what he would do.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Well, and it was
yeah.
fascinating because I was trying to figure out, like, or I shouldn't say I was trying to, I knew how to get him involved in that because
Uh-huh.
earlier he had described the chess scene, right? And
Hmm.
so to me,
Hmm.
that said my character
Hmm.
thinks
Hmm.
tactically. Sometimes I
Yes.
make mistakes, but I will improvise to
Yeah.
win, right? And so I was
Right.
like, all right, well, this makes sense. So it was cool because that, and again, you know, we've talked about this a
Yeah.
lot, but for people that are new to it, like, it's those little
Yeah.
clues that the players give you,
Yeah.
um, that can
And
help you to inform how you kind of
yeah.
narrate the
Yeah,
scenes.
and we always tell the players, you are what you say you are. So David does
Yeah,
a great job of describing how they're playing chess,
yeah,
and David did a great job of then taking that analogy, that analog, directly to Westworld and showing him that war is a chess match, but these are the results as he shows the wounded Uda to the boy. It's like, hey, yeah, but here's the consequences of making these decisions that, which is fantastic, and then of course there's roles to decide if that changes
well,
the kid's demeanor or
what was
So
interesting too
all
was
that
like,
stuff is great. Yeah.
oh, I love that. And it was wild because to me, I was like, that helped me sort of inform how what do you call it, how Westworld would act, because he said that he got that example, and now Faustus was like, look, you're responsible in a sense for the lives of these people, and we shouldn't take them for granted. And so he was like, well, shit, I can't let my uncle let alone his men like suffer at the hands of these Danes if I could do something, right? And so it was cool because I very much wanted to have Westworld be able to kind of start to hint at the his heroic nature and his bravery and whatever. But I didn't want to put too much spotlight on that, obviously, because he is an NPC.
Sure.
But it was
and
fun.
the whole goal there is if David does, what David's doing and saying matters. It has to matter, and then there may be a role. So if there's a role, then you just put in your back pocket. This might influence whether Westworld, next time his father says, "Should we go into battle?" He might be a little more. He might weigh the consequences of that. He might weigh that next time and say, "No, Father, I'm not certain this is the wise decision."
Right.
It doesn't have to show up immediately. It can show up later next time Dad says, should we parlay with these guys? So I like to think that when my character said to Washburn, "This is our last chance. Do you want to negotiate? This is our last chance to look at that army."
Yeah.
And then I failed the roll, and he said, "No, what do you think, Westworld? We're going to war." And right.
Yeah.
Had that scene happened after David showed him the horrors of war, I would like to think if David succeeds at a role, then Westworld might have said to his father, maybe we should try one more time.
Yeah.
Right? So you can hold those things in your pocket.
Right.
And because Westworld can become a great man, but he'll become a great man through a different direct. He can become a great man through war or through being smart about war, right?
Yeah, totally.
There's many ways to become a great leader, right?
Yep. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's pretty sweet. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
You're naive. So you don't know what Westworld's going to think. So David portraying that and then successfully making a role, that informs you that this has to now affect Westworld, whether I like that or not, because David succeeded at changing Westworld's thoughts about war, right? That this we don't enter these things lightly, right? Yeah. Which is sweet. I mean, this is the whole point of the game is the players are being in character. They're going to pursue their interests and their motives and their character. So David's character is, hey, I'm a man of peace. I'm a learned man. I'm here to teach you. But part of my job of teaching you is, hey, these are the horrors of war. Now go on if you want to and get yourself killed. But it's awesome. It's just awesome, and it's exactly what you wouldn't see in D&D. You're not going to see any of this stuff in. Yeah.
I mean, you can, but it's just one of those things where it's
there's no mechanics to support it. It's role play without mechanics.
Yes, exactly.
Because when it comes time to have the mass battle in D&D, well, you're going to go to mass battle rules, and you're going to do mass battle rules.
Yep. Exactly.
There is no mechanical effect in D&D of David convincing the young lord, right? There's no mechanical effect, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it was really funny. I really wanted Del to get that sword. And I couldn't do it last session because David wasn't there. Well, I could have, but I thought that what would be so cool would be if Willem, because I think Faustus was one of the last people that Willem saw, because he was the one who kind of was nursing him back to health or whatever. Yeah, and exactly. So I was like, in my mind, I was thinking, well, I'm going to retire Willem.
Yeah.
but I got that sword, and I was like,
Yeah.
one thing that he really respected was honor and bravery, right? And so
Right.
Savrik really showed that in the session before, in session 3, I think. And so
Yeah.
yeah, it was cool. And so when he was able to get it, and I was like, oh, good, because I wanted him to have that, whether it was going to be a big
Yeah.
thing or he was just like, whatever, I have this sword, it's a cool sword.
Well,
But it was great because he took it and
way to have done that. So the easiest way, how I would have handled that, I would have just had the sword delivered by an NPC from Willem,
yeah,
and
and
then you don't have to
yeah,
ask David's character
yeah.
to try to do it, right?
I was
Yeah.
going, and that's initially what I was gonna do.
Yeah.
And then but I was like,
Because if you wanted him to have the sword, just have somebody deliver him the sword, and then David's character may or may not be required to. It wouldn't be David's responsibility, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the funny thing was, I it was weird because I was kind of thinking like, do I want to make this kind of just hey, here's the sword, or did I want to make it a little bit more kind of impactful? And so I felt like, okay, giving that responsibility to David's character, even though he was like, whether he didn't choose that, but I was like, I'm going to take that liberty, and I'm going to say, this is something that he would like you to do. You do whatever you want, because obviously that's how it goes, right? But it was neat, and then it turned out to be such a cool thing, because then the way Dell rolled in those combats, he was able to really like
use it,
flavor that. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, it was awesome. That was a great session, and these, like I've said before, I told Dell, we're writing a simple game, mechanically simple game that is going to be complicated and sophisticated gameplay.
Right.
So what is an incredibly easy thing to play mechanically is it's going to open up, it's going to create games that are very sophisticated and complicated.
Oh yeah.
Because you're going to have intrigue and politics, you're going to have church, you're going to have and the average, I hate to say it, but I'm not certain a lot of people know how to handle those conflicts. It's not an easy thing for a presenter to do.
Right. No, it
and
isn't.
It's not easy for players that are accustomed to, hey, we go down a hall, we knock on a door, we try the door, we see if it's trapped, we go in, we kill some goblins, we take their treasure.
Yeah.
Players aren't always thinking on a scale of where does my character fit in the Dredgewater world? And therefore, who am I and what do I do to affect this game?
Right.
They will when they have a chance to play for a while. They'll start to go, oh, this is a different deal.
Right.
But it can create these complicated scenarios. I mean, you're like, okay, but it's not complicated for you mechanically. Oh, it's going to be a mass combat. That's just a DV rating, and that'll fluctuate up and down. That's easy enough, and some dice rolls will decide whether they're winning or losing this. Easy mechanically. The conflict, what the conflict actually is to decide dice rolls can become sophisticated.
Oh, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
How am I going to use prestige? Because I can't use body. I'm not a warrior with a sword and 4 body. But I'm using my knowledge and the fact that I'm a 35-year-old vet of the wars.
Right.
Well, I don't have to be a great warrior to have been successful at some point in my life. But now prestige is my only avenue to leading men.
Right.
So I have to narrate how I would do that from horseback, charging the men in, right?
Yeah.
And so you got to trust that I'm going to use prestige to sell that narrative.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If I sold you that I was going to charge him with my sword and fight him with my hand, you'd have to go, that's kind of stupid, Jason. You have no body, right? So you also have to trust that I'm going to use my prestige to narrate what I'm doing, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it was. I remember thinking when you introduced the character, right, and it was like, and the background that you gave him, and I was like, it's so interesting because with a 0 body, to me, it was like he was once a warrior.
Yeah.
So he's
an old man now.
He's got the skills, he's got the knowledge, but his body just isn't
necessarily
there, right?
Now.
Yeah, and so it was. I was like, man, this is a bold choice.
Get my son married off to Washburn's daughter because my legacy needs to be secured. I know I'm an old man now.
Oh, I
right?
know. And that was the thing. I was like, oh God, I wanted young Uda to be able to have at least an opportunity to have some
Right,
kind of glory. And he goes out
right,
before the battle even started, you know. I was
right.
like, oh,
Well, and if he had been
jeez.
killed, when I rolled the critical fail, I really did expect you to kill him because he's an
Well,
NPC. He can be killed. He can be
yeah.
removed from the narrative. And then I thought, if
Hmm.
that's it, and I'm thinking, if it turns out my son is dead,
Yeah.
that's going to impact whether I'm suicidal in this combat against the Danes
Right. Well,
because I have
and
nothing to live for. I have no, my wife's dead.
yeah.
My son would be dead.
Hmm.
So would I challenge him to the
Hmm.
home game?
Right.
Would
Yeah.
I draw the square and be willing to die in the
Yeah.
square with this Viking?
Right. Maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, we don't write the story.
Hmm.
We play characters, but what happens to the narrative when things occur?
Right.
So when young Uda dies, it changes
Yeah.
what I'm thinking my goals are for my
Oh,
character.
yeah. Totally.
And that could have changed me from calling out the square.
Yeah.
And when Stavrik says, "Let me fight for you," back away.
Yeah.
My son lay dead. I have nothing to lose, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Stavrik would have had to watch me die at the hands of this Viking, right?
Hmm. No, well, it
See,
was so funny, and because I didn't want to make that decision, so I was like, okay, I just kind of left it like he fell, he hit his head, and then you said I scoop him right up and go right to the medical tent. So to me, I was like, okay, that's a cool opportunity to kind of postpone his fate for a minute
yes,
and see what
yes,
happens,
yes,
right?
yes.
And then later you came back and you were like, I'm gonna roll luck to see how he
Yeah,
did. And so right
and
there, I was like, perfect. I
exactly.
don't have to make the decision. Like
Right.
the
Well,
dice can
that's the
decide.
thing.
Hmm.
So, and I thought you would ask me once I felt when I made the critical failure.
Hmm.
I half expected you after you described what happened to him to say, make a luck check. We'll see if he's alive or if he survives this. But you didn't. And I said,
Yeah,
okay, we're going to let that hang for a while.
yeah,
But I'm going to want the dice to dictate his fate.
yeah,
So that's why
yeah.
at the end
I
I
did
said, I'm
too.
here. I need to make a luck check to
Yeah.
see the fate of my son. And
Yep.
I think I rolled an 8 or 9 or
Yeah, you
something. So
did.
but
Yeah.
what's cool about that is I'm okay
Hmm.
with trusting the dice. I
Oh
don't want
yeah.
to decide. I'm a character.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to
I
find out. So, but I like that we postponed that check
yeah.
until after the battle, right?
Well, I did too. Because I was thinking about it at that moment. I'm like, what would add more tension? Because I was like, Uda dying would be horrendous. Like that would be
And it
terrible.
would have it would have
Yeah, and it would
changed
have
my character's
very much.
attitude in the war.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but it on the other hand, it almost would have been much more clear as to what Uda would have done, right? And I was
right.
like, what if young Uda's not dead yet?
Yeah, right,
Then what
right,
does Uda do? Because I was like, is he gonna be like, nope, forget it, you lead my
right,
troops, I'm gonna stay with my son, or is it
right,
like, nope, crap, I have this
right,
duty, I have to,
right.
So I want,
That's it.
I was like,
Because you don't
I'm
listen.
gonna,
I'm playing Udda. You
yeah,
have no idea how
yeah,
I'm gonna act as Udda.
yeah,
You shouldn't, because it's my
no, I know,
character, and you
yeah,
can be naive about whether Udda's dead or not. Right?
oh
That's
yeah,
what dice are for. When
yeah,
I made that critical fail roll, you could have said, "Oh, I hate to say this, but that critical fail,
mm-hmm, yeah,
he's in a bad
I,
way." Right?
oh God, I
But the
know,
critical fail roll just put him in a situation where he may or may not die, which was perfect.
right, yeah, and
We
then I
resolved
was like,
that
ooh,
later
are
with
they
a
gonna
luck
get to
check.
drill into his head? That would be fun. I was
Right?
like,
Right.
well, it was funny because you were talking about the scribe, and I was like, oh crap. So like, I got to make this meaningful, and right, and then I was like, okay, so he's got a head injury.
Yeah.
Well, this is the Dark Ages, so and we haven't established that there's magical healing,
Right.
because Brother Aethelwald hasn't showed up yet.
That's
So
right. Right.
um, so I was like, well, crap. All right. So yeah, then they're like, well, if we cut open a little hole in his head, we'll relieve the swelling pressure. They knew that much anyway. And I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're gonna lobotomize the young
Yeah.
Uda.
Or you just say he lay
Hmm.
unconscious in coma,
Right.
and I'll come back and check on him after the battle if I survive.
Yeah. Well, and so it was.
You don't have to give any
Yeah.
details. Just hey, he's
Yeah.
unconscious. He's alive
Hmm.
but unconscious, and we just go off to battle, not knowing his
Yeah.
state until we come back.
Oh yeah. Well,
Right?
and it was
Yeah.
funny too because I was thinking about a couple of things. I remember in I think it was the early seasons of the Last Kingdom when the character Uda, the Elder or whatever, they're
Is
in
his
battle,
name
and
Udda?
he
Is it really Udda?
yeah, it
Oh my
is,
god, I haven't seen it in years.
and
It's
Utter the
funny. I thought
younger
it was
is his son. Yeah,
I'll be damned.
yeah,
So somewhere it stuck in my brain
yeah,
subconsciously when I created the
yeah.
character.
Oh, he was
That's
great
fate. I was thinking
because
about
yeah,
the father and the son pair, but I could not remember.
yeah,
I didn't know their name. So
yeah.
I must have remembered it and didn't realize it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and it was fun because, of course, what happened, but young Utter was a total tool and it was terrible.
Oh,
But
sure
like,
they were. Sure,
but
sure.
the older one takes a blow to the head,
Oh, that's right. That's
and they
right.
think he's gonna die, and so the younger Utter is kind of taking,
Yes.
he's
Control.
acting as head of the house while his father's incapacitated, which was cool. And then, but then Utter the elder, he's such a tough bastard that he's like, nope, I'm not gonna let this take me down, right? And so he eventually kind of recovers, but
Mhm.
and then he has to, he has the fate of Utter the younger at
Mhm.
the hands of his father was sad.
Mhm.
But then later, and I don't know if this happened in the show, but in the books, um uh what the Lord of Mercia, what was his name? Aethel
Oh,
Aeth, Eth,
Aethelwald. Yeah, Aethelwald.
no. So Ethelfled
Yes.
was the
Yeah.
daughter of Alfred. Her husband was
The,
Ethelweld, because
I
I don't
can't
know. Anyway,
remember,
it was one of those Ethel
but
names.
he
But
was a
anyway,
tool too. Yeah, he
he
was
was
a shit
terrible.
too.
But in the books, I think it's like book 9 or 8 or something.
Mhm.
He gets hit in the head
Yes, he
with an
does in the show
axe.
too. He does in
Yeah,
the movie too, the
and then
show
he's
too.
all like, and
Yeah.
he dies. Um, but it was funny because it was like he lived for a while, but he was like not capable
Yeah.
of anything, and I was like,
Not
oh
functioning.
damn.
Yeah.
I was like, a head wound at
Yeah.
that
In the
point, if you
show, the guy
survive
kills
it.
him.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the show,
Yeah.
the guy
Yeah.
twists and crushes what's left of his skull with the damn
Oh yeah.
yeah, that evil son of a gun in the show, right? That's amazing. I haven't watched that in a while. I'll have to go back and watch some of those. But it's a
It's so
great
good.
for me. It was a great inspiration during the
Yeah.
because I was watching it while we were actually working on Dark Age of Man. I was like, oh
Yeah.
my god, this is perfect timing. So
Yeah. Right.
so it kept me engaged in the inspiration of what we were doing with Dark Age of Man. But
Mm-hmm.
no, it's great. And this felt again very much it feels very much like that. And as I tell people, it's you're not a D&D character who can just cast spells, just swing a
Right.
sword, make a handful of decisions that are mechanically supported by the rules, pick locks,
Yeah.
open doors, light a torch. You can imagine
Mm.
any character. You can provide at least a base set of attributes to support what you say you're being,
Yep.
and then you have to put your character in that space when it comes to conflict resolution.
Mm.
In D&D, all conflict resolution is combat, all of it.
Right.
Everything is combat.
Right.
Your characters in our game can resolve conflict and never get in combat.
Yeah.
Your character was never in combat and resolved lots of conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's what makes Dark Age of Man a character-driven game
Mm-hmm.
because you aren't written out of the war
Right.
because you're not a combatant. Now,
Right.
David could choose to take a more active role, or he could choose to take a different role, or David
Yeah.
could have chose to use magic or something like that. So,
Yeah.
but David's in complete control of how much Faustus gets involved with the conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely. Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, well, and I'll probably wrap it up here soon, but I
Mhm.
was thinking that it's really interesting, and if you do end up doing kind of like a session recap or whatever, I look forward to
Yeah,
those because they're always
yeah.
and they're also very informative, right? I
Sure,
was very
sure.
conscious in this session to try to really like uh, let the dice really
Uh-huh.
kind of decide
Yep.
the outcome a little bit more.
Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah,
Yeah, and so that
awesome.
was fun. But it was crazy because when I wrote or when I rolled the one where the Justicar was helping
Yeah.
the enemy, that was like number 18. That was like the big bad terrible
Oh,
one. And so I was thinking about that because part of me was gonna have the Justicar and the men of Northwich ride in just as you guys were starting to gain the advantage, and really just put a
Well, and with an 18, you could.
and
It's
it
a
could
world
have,
changer. A
yeah.
world changer. Yeah.
But I was
Because
like,
one of my character asked when
yeah,
Harvick told me, "Well, did you see the army?" Because I'm thinking, "Oh, damn, we got another army to deal with." So I immediately
right.
responded like it was going to be an army, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, well, and
Yeah.
so, but what was interesting was um on my sheet, I think I had mentioned specifically that they were aiding Mort. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I was, and
Mm-hmm.
I think I just had that written down. I didn't really think
Yeah.
about it when I was writing the
Mm-hmm.
RSC, but when I rolled it this time, I was like, we really haven't figured out what Von Mort's doing. And
Mm-mm.
so to me, I was like, okay, the politics of it are a little tricky because the King Northwich does not want the Danes here.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, they also don't want to necessarily get, tangled up with Eastumbria or Eastumberland or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, because
Mm-hmm.
that wouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
good. And so, and then when the Justicar kind of was rebuked by Uda and then
Mm-hmm.
saw the men from
No,
London come in, he
right.
was a little
Right.
pissed. So he probably made a bad decision. But anyway, he left thinking like,
Right.
I'm gonna do something. And then I didn't know what he was gonna do. And so when I rolled
Right.
that, I was really torn at that moment because I was like, this is the big event, but like I
Right.
really, really felt like the momentum of the story was really carrying us
Mm-hmm.
into the conflict with this group of Danes.
Right.
And so what I thought was, and I always think about the long game, and so I was
Yeah.
kind of thinking like, okay, well that one could be more impactful in a later session. Um,
Right.
so but I was so like, I don't know if I want to bring this in as it's weighted,
Right.
because
Well, it's in.
I did put
Well,
it at
it's in. It's
18. Yeah,
just
yeah. No, but what I meant
be
was like,
the
how much
immediate
weight
threat.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so to me,
Yeah.
I was thinking in that moment, nope, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus in on this particular
Right.
conflict and then
Right.
leave the big implications, because now Northwich is no longer saying we're
Neutral.
gonna help you. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
like, we're gonna F
Yeah.
with
They're
you
not neutral
now.
now.
Yeah.
Right. They're
So
not a
it's like,
friend.
oh.
They're not neutral. They are an enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And so and
I'll
that
let
is,
Dell deal with
yeah,
that.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's outstanding. Yeah. And that's the
Yeah.
thing about the RSC, right? You can
Right.
use it. You can use it immediately, or you can say,
Mm-hmm.
well, I'm going to wait till the context is right.
Right.
And so you said, well,
Exactly.
we got a impending war here. The
Yeah.
context isn't right, but you were then informed that in the world, they
Right.
are now an enemy. It didn't
Yep.
have to show up immediately. Right.
Right. Right. Well, yeah,
Perfect. Yeah.
and it's like,
But you did a great job of letting us know by the fields are on fire,
right.
which put an onus on us. My character immediately thought, well, it can't be the Danes because they'd be
Right.
asinine to burn up their own food source.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So immediately
Exactly.
I'm thinking, why would the Danes do it? And we certainly
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't do it.
Right.
And right. So
Yeah.
that's what. So yeah. So
Yeah.
my
And
character was
so,
at least, yeah. And you got to trust the players to go,
uh-huh.
okay, who the hell's burning the fields, right? So
Right.
we'll find out who the Northwich is, right?
Yeah. Well, and
And
to
so what
me,
happened is I
when I
sent
rolled
Harvick to
that, yeah.
investigate. Yeah,
Yeah. That was great. And I
right?
was like, oh,
Yeah.
crap. Like, because I had the same thing. I was like, when I rolled fields burning, I was like, what the hell am I going to do with this? Because, yeah, I was like, the absent the context of a like standing army, basically, because you're
Right.
right, there's no way they would do that. They would just take the crops.
Yep.
So I was like, fuck, who's actually doing this? And then I was
Who's
like, well,
doing this?
is it Mort? But then I was
Right.
like, well, but that would actually hurt the Danes,
Yep.
who actually are benefiting him, so
Yeah.
that wouldn't necessarily make sense.
That's
But
the
I was
great
like,
thing
I don't
about
know
being the
who it is.
naive.
Right. And
Yeah.
then when it said Northwich came in, I was like, okay,
Yep.
that would make sense. They are actively trying to hurt, because this will hurt
Both the
both
Vikings
Danes
and us.
yeah. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
You know, so that was, but I had to
Yeah, I mean,
think
you don't
fast
have
on
to
that
know.
one. I was like, oh, yeah,
That's the whole point with naive narrator is
right,
you don't have to know any logic behind werewolf. Like, okay, how am I
right,
going to introduce this? What's the logic? Who cares? Just introduce it somehow, some way,
yeah,
and let the players make sense of it.
right,
You
right,
know, I mean, the first thing I did when you said it was, who the hell would do it? Because if the Danes
right,
are doing it, they're morons. We're not
yeah,
going to do it. I ended up making sense of that mostly. I don't have to know the
yeah,
answer, but I'm thinking
yeah,
about it. And then,
yeah,
of course, you roll another thing that informs you. Oh, well, it's the
yeah,
Northman. Makes total sense.
right.
Or the Northwich, the Northwich.
North of
And
Chin,
that's
yeah,
what I said when I tell people naive narrator is different than just rolling random
hmm
monsters, random tables. Because you're supposed to be naive, and if you're naive,
hmm
then what happens is that aha moment, as Ivan
right,
had in their last session.
hmm
Ivan finally had that oh my god aha moment when Eloy described that he talked to the fairy people to cast the spell,
mm,
and then Ivan's next roll was a dead prisoner, and he went, well, who is this? Oh, it's one of the fairy people.
right, exactly,
Right?
yep,
It just clicked because
hmm
Eloy created the fairy people.
right,
Ivan said, oh, then this is a little fairy person that's been executed for the blood
hmm
magic. So then Eloy's character ended up basically killing they had to
hmm
sacrifice a fairy person to get his magic done, and then asked Eloy that he has to replay. He's now in a blood pact with the fairy people.
oh God,
So the complication of that RSC was
right,
Eloy doesn't realize that what he asked the fairy people to do meant they had to kill somebody.
oh
So
yeah,
Eloy's character, he finds out, oh, my magic caused one of them to be murdered,
yeah,
and Eloy now has to pay back in
yeah,
10 gallons of milk, 10
yeah,
bushels
and
of corn, whatever. It's
right,
great.
and some pots of honey and whatever, yeah,
But that was, I think, the first time that for Ivan,
mm,
you can even see it in the session. It's kind of like, oh shit, I get it.
yeah,
This is why you're naive. It's not a
right,
wandering monster. It's not just a random encounter.
yeah,
Be naive because whatever we're doing and saying
yep.
actually becomes that RSC roll, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
100%. It was like when I
Yeah.
rolled hostages taken, I was like,
Yeah.
yikes, because I was trying to figure out how to do that because we were
Mhm.
zoomed into the battle at that point, and I'm
Yeah.
like, well, how is this going to work? And so it worked
Yep.
out well that on one of the failed rolls, I was
Yep.
then able to say, okay,
Yeah, we
you
were
know,
furious
yeah,
from they're aldermen. So it was
yeah,
easy to say they're so beaten that they're taking them hostage. It was perfect.
right, yeah,
And we thought, oh right, they may not kill us. They may take us hostage.
yeah,
It
yeah, exactly.
foreshadows that they are slavers. They may not kill us. They may just take us as slaves.
Well, yeah, and I mean, well, yeah, exactly, because that's what we had talked about the slaves in the previous session, and then,
Yeah.
um, and that's funny because that still kind of has to be resolved because where are those slaves and where are the Danes and the fact that like I set it up as these guys are not just like raiding, they're like they
Right.
want to settle, and so it's like oh god, like
Yeah.
what is gonna happen, but it was I just love how the narrative way that this game works can
Yeah.
create such a cool cinematic
Yep.
session
Yeah.
because like you describing charging your alderman down the hill
Right. Right.
into that, I was like that is insane, like
Mm-hmm.
there's like
Yep.
what you're gonna get killed, and then the dice did what they did, and I was like oh
Uh-huh.
man and but
It's even
then
worse. I rolled a critical
yeah,
fail.
right, so then your
Not
your
only
group
was
is
it
broken,
not only
yeah,
was it dangerous to charge them, which we have to do, that's what we're doing.
yeah,
I then rolled a critical fail, which is like, oh
right,
shit.
right, and so then I was like well the rest of the army is
Right.
slow,
Mhm.
and also now you have to get your men to be
Right.
like wait a minute, he just led us
Yeah.
into a catastrophic
Right.
charge, are we going to listen to him again, but
That's right.
manage the
That's right.
role, and so
Yeah.
it was like
Yeah, because morale, they would break
mhm,
upon you can imagine how many of them were slaughtered in that
yeah,
failed attempt.
oh
I mean, how
yeah,
many of their brethren did they watch get cut down in that failed attempt?
yeah,
Right?
exactly. Ugh, so I
Yeah.
don't know,
It's awesome.
maybe they need to take some slaves to kind of replace the farm labor that they just lost, but oh
Yeah, it's
brutal,
awesome. And that's
yeah,
the other reason again, if you understand the assets
hmm
So your men were an asset, and you did not want to lose a lot of them, whether you were a lord or you were a
Right.
Viking raider. Because if the more men you lose, you're not going to be able to hang around and stay and settle
Yeah.
because you have no army to protect you.
Well,
So
yeah,
it
and
was in his best interest to
yeah,
step into the square at that point because he wouldn't
right.
want to lose any more men than we were losing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And if you understand the economy of the Dark Ages, then
Yeah.
those become negotiation.
Oh,
But again, a
yeah.
lot of players, and you don't have to know anything about the Dark Ages to enjoy our game and just a fantasy
Right. Yeah, but if
level.
you do, it's so much
But
more
boy,
rich,
it's
I
so much
think.
richer.
Yeah.
It's so much richer
Hmm.
when you know that, like for instance, technically I'm an alderman, but I'm a vassal.
Yeah.
So that's what aldermen are. So when he
Yeah.
calls us to war, we have land that we are allowed to cultivate, but we
Mhm.
owe him military allegiance. That's how
Right.
we get the land.
That's right.
So when he calls the alderman and the fjord, we have to go. That's the whole reason we have
Hmm.
been granted land is for military
Right.
service.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and if you don't, that's a very big deal,
breaking the
and
law.
you
You're
you
breaking the
have
law. Yeah.
yeah, you basically have to
Hmm.
oust him at that point if you want to be safe. And even
That's why you would
then,
have to yeah,
yeah,
you would have to
right.
basically declare war on your own
Yeah.
lord. Right, right,
Yeah.
right.
And so
Yeah,
so that was, but it was funny because uh yeah, the consequences feel so much different when you have
right,
a little bit of understanding of the setting because like you
right.
said, right, the idea of and I made a point to keep mentioning the fact, and I know you guys knew this already, but to mention the fact that like these are peasant soldiers, these are serfs,
Yeah. Well,
they
they're farmers. They're
yeah,
farmers.
and
Yeah.
some, and I know like some, aldermen or thanes or whatever would train and equip the men to a certain
Right,
extent,
right,
depending on their wealth and whatever, or they might
right.
have a larger contingent of men at
Mhm.
arms so they wouldn't have to
Right.
bring as many.
And that can
But
be
yeah.
and that can actually be part of the actual session. I'm an
Mm,
alderman with a 5 purse.
mm-hmm.
Before we describe my peasants, I can say I want to make a purse check to
Yeah.
see if I have been training and outfitting my peasants
Yeah.
for this type of thing. And you
Yep.
can say, awesome, let's roll to find out narratively whether you've done that.
Mm,
If I make the roll, then we just narrate that, yeah, over the years, I have made sure
yeah.
I've equipped them and I've trained them.
Yeah.
So I would
Yeah.
start with a darn good fjord. The other aldermen may not.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I could fail that role and say, no, they're peasants with shovels and pitchforks and right.
Yeah.
But I didn't call it up,
Yep.
and you didn't call it up, but we could have. I could have said, I want to
Right.
use my purse to improve my army. And we
Yeah.
narratively described that's how I've
Yeah.
conducted my business, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it
That's
didn't
true.
have to. It doesn't yeah,
Right.
it's
That's
and
what's
that's the other thing
interesting is
about
like,
the attributes, the purse,
right.
using the purse, using
Mm-hmm.
prestige, using spirit to create
Mm-hmm.
bread and wine in the streets of famished
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
I mean, you utilize the rules as a character perfectly to create miracles as Aethelwald. I mean, as
Right.
brother Aethelwald.
Yeah, brother
Aethelwald.
Aethelwald.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, and it
yeah.
was cool too because it was like, basically I was like, can I try to do this thing? And of course you're like, yeah, go for it. So I
Mhm.
described how I want it, and then the dice just happened
Support it.
to give me that critical success, to support like an actual no shit miracle,
Yeah,
like, which
right.
is cool because
Well,
obviously like if I had succeeded in a
yeah,
role but maybe it wasn't, the stakes weren't that
right,
high, right, then
right.
it might be like, oh well, you found a cache of bread and
Hmm.
cheese that
Hmm.
the soldiers had been storing, and you might
Right,
attribute that to God, but it
right.
so is it a miracle?
It would have been an
Yeah,
abstract. It would have been
but
an
right,
abstract reflection of
right,
God's the
right,
miracle of God,
yeah,
as opposed to you actually creating from what you
right,
stole.
yeah,
Because you actually stole wine, bread, and cheese from the table of the Lord when you went out in the street.
yeah,
And from that, I think we narrated, you just kept handing out more and more and more than you would have ever grabbed from the table,
right, yeah. I just kept ripping the
right?
bread, and it
But
just
the
kept
critical
doing it.
success
Yeah,
made it an actual miracle,
right, yeah. That was
which
so
is what
cool.
we
Yeah,
trusted but you acted, I'm going to pray to God to help me feed these people and start
yeah,
handing out what I'd stolen.
mm-hmm.
And then when you made the spirit check and got a critical, then it's like, oh no, there's no question you got enough food to feed all these people, right? It's a
Right,
miracle.
yeah, yeah,
And that's what makes the system so good. You
yeah,
acted the way you wanted to. you
Right.
prayed to God for help, and then you just
Yeah.
happen to roll a 12,
And
right?
it happened. Yeah, and the dice
Yeah.
were able to inform it, and I got the result,
Mhm.
the best possible result I could get.
Right.
But
Right.
you know, and that was really lucky. And there were other times where you know,
Yep.
I think I can't remember. Did I end up like was there like a giant or something that was attacking?
Yeah, the ogre, the
The
ogre,
ogre, right? And
an
then did
ogre's
I
at Brian's
at
father's
Brian's
house
father's?
that
Yeah,
next morning, an ogre came
yeah.
stumbling out of the woods,
Yeah, and then I was like,
and you
smite
guys all
God,
fought
smite
the
him or
ogre.
something, and then a
Yes.
lightning bolt got him. I was like,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
freaking crazy.
It became a different level of fantasy
Right.
because of the power of God, because these
Yeah.
miracles, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That was neat.
Eloy's using magic in their game.
Right.
Eloy's literally using dark magic, basically,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is
Oh
sweet.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so I definitely need to get to bed, but I
Yeah.
wanted to say I am thinking that I want to run maybe for the next like Dark Age of Man
Yeah.
campaign that I run or Chronicle. I want to do one set in Scandinavia where like you
Uh-huh.
are a
Viking.
yeah, you're like Ragnar before he's famous, right? Like you're
Yeah.
just the Jarl of
Right.
Kattegat, and then just see where that
Yeah.
goes because I think it would be super fun to play out the invasion of Ireland or you know
Right.
England or whatever,
Right. Right.
or raiding and kind of seeing it, but also having the idea of well, do I go back to
Right.
Sweden, Norway, whatever, or do I settle,
Right.
or do I
Hmm.
try to do both? You know, it's like
Yeah.
so. I'm thinking I might try to do like an actual Viking
Yeah. Awesome.
set game, which would be fun, and then I am trying to figure out when I can run the next session of Dark Age of Heroes because I've been
Yeah.
jonesing to
Yeah.
get back to that. So I'm
Awesome. Love
hopeful
it.
in the next month or
Heck
whatever I
yeah.
might be able to do that.
And there may be some Saturdays that work as well, at
Yes,
least for
yeah,
me and Dale.
yeah. That's what I was
I
thinking
can't
for
promise
that. Yeah.
I can't promise David can make Saturdays, but there's always
No.
for
Yeah.
Dale and I a Saturday here and there, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, we'll find time for sure, man. Love it. Love it.
Awesome.
This
All
was
right.
great, my friend. 2 great sessions, and I'll be tired tomorrow, so I probably won't get my recap done immediately, but
Don't worry, I won't be
I'll
able to
get it
watch it
done sometime
immediately.
tomorrow.
So, yep.
Uh,
Awesome.
and I don't know what happened with my computer, but it's like it suddenly chugged. You guys started freezing, and then it would come
Mhm.
back for a second, freeze, and then eventually it froze for like 5 minutes,
Right.
and I literally was clicking buttons,
Yeah.
waiting for it, and then I finally got into Windows to look and see if I was
Mhm.
getting it up. I thought, oh, I must be getting an update right in the middle of this. Sure enough, I was getting some cumulative update right in the middle of the game. I'm like, oh, so the computer was just chugging, and I just had to
Mhm.
wait for it to stop, and then boom, I was
Mhm.
back. So I missed 5 minutes or so, but
Yeah, no, it's all good. But yeah, I was
yeah.
like, because usually it's my computer that does that, and so I was like, I couldn't tell. I was like, wait, is this
Was it
me
me or you? Right? Well,
or
I
is it?
thought it was
Yeah,
you guys. And
right,
then I'm sitting here talking, going, "Hey guys, you're froze up. Hey Sam, you're froze up." And then I realized, oh,
right.
I'm the one froze.
Yeah, right. And I was like, wait, is it me? Is it what's happening? But then
It's like, oh
David
damn.
was talking, and I was like, I don't know. So, but we worked it out. It was all good.
That was awesome, brother. All right,
Nice.
my friend, and I don't know which Tuesday next we'll run something here
Yeah,
as far as but we'll get it on the schedule, and I'm hopefully it'll be Dell. It'd be nice to have Dell run us
yeah, that'd
now.
be great. Yeah,
So we
absolutely.
gotta twist Dell's arm to run us in his own in our own game. He's gotta step up and run us.
Mm-hmm. He
He
does.
doesn't want it to be a
Because
tutorial, so like, well, don't run it like one, just run it.
yeah, yeah,
He
just
doesn't
play
have
the
to
run the
do a
game.
tutorial. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome,
absolutely.
brother. Well, get some rest. I thank you.
I will. Awesome. Have a good one. Take it
You
easy.
too.